Alright guys, get your debris, get your cosmos ready, because today we are covering a Galactus list. This particular build made it into the top 4 of a 128 player tournament. It started with a Swiss round, several Swiss rounds, into a bracketed finish. And from what I saw, he navigated this one to perfection. This list was piloted by a user named Revis HS. I will leave a link to his channel, to his content in the description below. So if you want to see more of this and anything else that he's brewing, definitely jump over there and check it out. 2 weeks ago, we finally had Galactus crack the top 8 of a tournament. This week, we had one get top 4. He finished 3rd with this list, and it was a very close finish. And from what I saw, he was just obliterating it. He was running this deck to perfection. And the reason that this is such a big deal is because Galactus in and of itself is a very telegraphed play. It is very straightforward. You know that Galactus is coming, usually from the first couple of plays from your opponent's deck. So how did he get so far? To be able to do so well with a Galactus list, one, you're probably going to have a little bit of luck. You're going to have to navigate it well, but you also have to have contingency factors built into the deck, so you have multiple play lines to find wins. And so Galactus is not the only way to win with this deck. It is a major one, but it's not the only way to do it. And so looking at the list, we have a Nimrod. That is going to give you the flexibility to sometimes do a turn 6 Galactus. If everything else falls apart, you can lean in on that. Sometimes you can do Nimrod into your destroyer. That's going to send quite a bit of power across the board. It's not always going to beat every single deck or every matchup, so that's not my main focus with the deck, but it is a potential playline. We also have Shuri. Shuri can do the Shuri into Nimrod. Shuri into Doc Ock has been one of my personal favorites. If you can identify that they're not running a Shang-Chi, or you want to gamble and you do the Shuri into Doc Ock, thinking that that will be enough to cap out that lane, sometimes that 22 power, or a little bit more if you played like an Electro, a Daredevil, or a Jeff, sometimes a little bit more than 22 power is going to be enough to cinch that win. And so if so, we have Taskmaster to fall back on to be able to copy the 20 power from our Doc Ock after draining the majority of the opponent's resources, making it really hard for them to push that little bit of extra value home. We have Daredevil as a way to read. We have the Electro and Wave to ramp into our bigger components. For me, in this list, I like Electro a little bit better than Wave, just because you need that consistency. Electro into a Doc Ock, into a Galactus, into a Knull is a fantastic play. Now, if you do Wave, you can do Galactus early, but then you're stuck with a turn 5 play, so you may end up doing something like a Doc Ock, and then maybe you can finish it off with either a Death or a Knull, but it becomes a little bit more rigid, a little bit tougher to navigate. And so for me, if I am going to drop Wave, I typically like to do it on turn 4 into turn 5 rather than turn 3 into 4. There are certain Galactus builds, the ones that run Spider-Man, that doing a Wave on 3 into 4 allows you to really get a lot of advantage over your opponent. It's really hard for them to win from that point. With this one, we would much rather get the safe read with Daredevil, get a few additional cards destroyed when we play our Galactus so that our Knull is a little bit bigger to give us that little bit of extra value. It also gives us more time for the opponent to develop their side of the board so that we can play our Galactus in a lane that has a little bit over 2, but nothing that we don't think we're going to be able to overcome. And so overall, the deck is a Galactus list. There are a lot of different ways to play it. It is a very fun list for Galactus. I still feel bad. You guys shouldn't feel bad. If Galactus is what's working, if you find it fun, definitely slam Galactus as much as you can, even if it's sometimes frustrating. If it's good, then it's good. And so typically Galactus doesn't fit my playstyle, and I want to cover it because it may make a pretty meaningful impact in the meta. And so knowing how to adjust to any particular build or any particular popular build, I think is very important, even if it doesn't necessarily fit your playstyle. And so this one, I probably won't run it much after the video, not because it's not good, just because Galactus doesn't necessarily fit the way that I like to play in most games. And so with the brief deck explanation out of the way, we're going to go ahead and jump over into a couple of games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, first up we have Bleach. The first location is Lemuria, and so nothing's going to reveal this turn. A lot about this early game, this deck, is being able to skip the early game turns into just doing some explosive things on the last. So we're going to go ahead and play our Jeff. Jeff is here for that kind of consistency. If we get blocked, if we get locked down, Jeff helps kind of sneak into and surprise the opponent with locations that we can win in a lot of cases or a lot of scenarios. Let's go with the Wave now. They have the Adam Warlock, so they could be running a Cerebro 3. Is the most common deck that I see Adam Warlock in. Bishop. Okay, never mind. I lied. I don't know what kind of deck they're using that has the Adam Warlock in it. All right, so the only bad thing here is that because there are so few cards, this doesn't get really, really big. Now, with them having Bishop, I'm thinking they're running like a bounce package or something similar. I'm going to go ahead and assume that they won't be able to reach into the Crimson Cosmos with very many resources after this turn. And so we're going to go ahead and make them kneel. We're going to play the Galactus. Our death is not super discounted. We do get the retreat. All right, that is pretty common. We we make them upset. Okay. We're going to go ahead and play it a little bit more aggressively. Really, really lean in to the Galactus. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Jun Li. The first location is the Vibranium Mines. So we probably won't play anything there. Maybe it's that we eventually play our Galactus or Destroyer. We have Destroyer this game. It's always a little bit tricky whenever they have a Galactus counter and you know that you could win with the Destroyer, but you just don't have the resource you need. Now, Elysium is interesting because we're going to be able to, without a ramp component, without really showing any signs of anything, we're going to be able to do like a Doc Ock on, 4 into a Galactus on 5, and that's going to be very, very disruptive. One, it drains so many of their resources, but it also just makes it so difficult for them to continue to navigate and find a way to win. Let's go ahead and Doc Ock into the flooded lane. Now, they used Goose, so they could be anticipating that we're running some kind of restriction deck. Maybe. The Polaris comes down, the Cosmo comes down. Ooh. So we actually have this lane tied for right now. If we can get a Galactus to go off. So they've used their movement component. They use a second movement component. Does a Silver Surfer deck run 3 counter movement cards? I don't think they do. I think those are the 2 Galactus counters, and they wasted them in the flooded lane. That's what my gut's telling me. I mean, we could also go with something like Nimrod, but I think Galactus here is going to be the play. They did snap, so whatever it is, they're confident about it. They could have a Professor X, right? Professor X could do it. Sarah. Okay, we're fine with Sarah. We are okay with Sarah. The Galactus is going to come down. And that's going to heavily reduce our death. We can't play death and Knull. But we can just do Knull. We don't have initiative here, so as long as 27 power wins, then we should be okay. They're not going to be able to use an Enchantress. They're not going to be able to use any kind of counters, and so we're just going to go ahead and send it. They do stay, but with Galactus, you have to anticipate at the very least, the death play. At the very most, the Knull play. And so we are able to hold down. What a wild game. We didn't really have to do anything, which is kind of speaks to how bad this deck feels in general. Because you don't really, it's kind of like Shuri, when you just played 3 cards and you were able to win. That's the same thing. We played 3 cards and we were able to win and circumvent all of their counterplays and their regular plays. Let's go ahead and take the 4 cubes. We'll jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Willowpino. The first location is the Vibranium Mines, so we can pretty comfortably assume that we're not going to need to play over there. Now, Sakaar is really interesting here. I'm going to go ahead and play Jeff into the unknown location, only because we can move it, so if we need to eventually do a Galactus, we can. But it leaves Sakaar open for a potential Galactus pull. It leaves Sakaar open for a potential Doc Ock, which would drain them of so many resources. In worst case scenario, we get an Electro, and so that ramps us into a Doc Ock anyways, or we get Shuri, and then we can kind of skip and play it a little bit slower than we would otherwise. And so they get a Jeff, we get our Galactus. Oh my gosh. Wild. It happens sometimes. Our Galactus is going to be very, very small. We're not going to get much use out of Galactus, but what we can do is Electro into maybe like a Doc Ock. We can do Electro into a Doc Ock on 4. Maybe we get Destroyer to use on 5, and then we can do Knull after that to clear up some additional space. That's our tentative play. Ooh, wow. We spoke it into existence, you guys. Let's go ahead and do the Doc Ock. We're going to do this dang thing. We're going to do the Doc Ock. We have the Destroyer to use next turn to wipe out this, and then everything that we're clearing on our side of the board will be able to be absorbed by the Knull. Wild. Absolutely wild Sakaar game. There are no words sometimes. So we have the Captain Marvel and the Wave. And so we will be able to do our Destroyer. Even if not, we could just do the Knull outright, and they wouldn't be able to play their counter cards, and we would be able to find a way to win anyways. By being able to block like a main counter of like a Cosmo with your Destroyer, you leave the door open for so many potential plays. Let's go ahead and take the 2 cubes. We'll jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have a Starscream. The first location is Danger Room, so we can, maybe besides our Daredevil, we can play cards into that location, and if they get destroyed, that's fine. They're going to help support our Knull and reduce the cost of our death. I'm trying to decide if we want to do that, though. I think either way, we do Daredevil, we can do Wave into Baxter Building. On turn 4, we can do a Doc Ock, even if we can't do the Galactus on turn 6. That's going to give us a lot of flexibility, a lot of information on the opponent. And so then if we end up doing Galactus, great. If not, then I think we restrict how many resources they have available to play. And so then we could always do something like Nimrod and hope it gets destroyed. If not, we can hit it with a Destroyer. Let's go with the Wave. We will Doc Ock into Negative Zone. It's always the most benefit to Doc Ock into Negative Zone, just because it restricts, it reduces the power of all of their cards so drastically. Plus, it puts him below Shang-Chi range, which is a huge benefit as well. So let's go ahead and lock in the Doc Ock. They did use Agent Coulson, so this could be a Hawk deck, a Devil Dino deck. It could be something very similar, but I think we're just going to outpace them by forcing them to having all of this stuff. So the Cosmo comes down. They don't get the Resurge from their Sentinel. They don't get anything with the Mystique. The Cord comes down, so they are a total of -1, and they're not able to move that out. So Captain Marvel will move at the end of the game, or can move at the end of the game. But that's about it. And so that actually leaves us open to do something like Nimrod and then Destroyer, and not even have to worry about if any power is over here or not, because they're -1. Let's go with the Nimrod and a Hope. We're going to hope that it gets destroyed. It does not. Unfortunately, it does not. Okay. All right, so now we can do something like Destroyer into Nimrod coming over here. It's going to be 20 power in this lane. I don't know if that's enough, though. We know that we have Negative Zone locked down, but winning one of these other ones might be tough. The Wave is probably the less advantageous playline with this deck, versus the other one that runs Spider-Man. The Wave into Galactus into Spider-Man is almost unstoppable. And so this one, it benefits a lot more from being able to have that flexibility to do more of your high power, high impact cards. And so we do end up getting the retreat. We will go ahead and take it. Let's jump over into one more. All right, next up we have Ben. I don't know if Ben is an actual person or if they're a bot. I never know for sure. They did snap back. Maybe it's Mr. Broad. You never know. We're going to go ahead and play Jeff into Asgard. He wanted to go to Xandar. We're going to play him in Asgard. We're going to tentatively compete for this location. And then we do have Shuri into Doc Ock into a Taskmaster. If we don't get any other plays. Right now we don't have either of our ramp components. Sometimes we definitely need them. Other times we can do without it. So this is one of those games that I think we're going to be fine. They did use they used a Green Goblin. They have a chance to win both of the Asgards, which is wild. Let's go ahead and play Shuri. I'm going to continue to stick to this lane, especially because we can move Jeff out. So if they have another Claw component, if they have Titania, we have the padding with Jeff to be able to move it out when we need to. They do a Typhoid Mary. So this is some kind of ongoing deck, some kind of wild ongoing deck that I'm absolutely here for. Let's go ahead and do our Doc Ock. They're completely loaded on resources, but as long as we don't hit, hit a Shang-Chi, we should be okay. And luckily for us, they have enough resources that it's probably not likely for us to hit. Hitting a Valkyrie though would not be fantastic. We could hit their demon. Demon would be fine. Enchantress. I mean, Enchantress hits their Typhoid Mare. That's not great. The Hobgoblin is huge. And then the Debris is fine. We were absolutely okay with that. Primarily because it forced them into capping out this far right lane. We were able to cap out this location and hold down the win, and we had the Taskmaster to copy. Even without it, we had this one won. We will go ahead and take the 1 cube retreat. I should have snapped. As soon as I saw the Shuri into Doc Ock, we should have snapped. We need to start playing it a bit more aggressively because this one does force a lot of retreats. All right, next up we have MC, and we do get our Electro. For this deck, I find that I like Electro a little bit better than Wave, just because we typically want to curve into our cards. So doing a Doc Ock on 4 into a Galactus, into a Destroyer, whatever that may be, or into a Destroyer and then a Knull. I like having multiple turns to be able to kind of support that. So we're going to go ahead and do Daredevil. We're going to continue to play for the left lane. Ooh, this looks like this could be another Galactus deck. And if so, that's not... I mean... that's not the worst thing in the world, right? We do have some reach here, even if this gets destroyed. They can only Galactus in Camp Lay, which isn't great. They took out our wave, so we're going to go ahead and do our Electro. We can then do a Doc Ock to drain them of resources, and then we have the flexibility of either doing a Destroyer or a Knull, and so they wave. Are they going to be doing the same thing, I wonder? Let's go Doc Ock into Camp Lay. We can then do something like Destroyer and then Knull to be able to get at least 30-ish power into the Nexus location. Or they're going to use Doc Ock and they pull our resources. So the Destroyer comes down first, which is a little bit unfortunate. But we do have we're going to discount. We're discarding both. We discard their death. We discard our death. Galactus comes down. Knull comes down. So unless they have a way to destroy that, we should be okay. Now, they do have one additional resource over us. We pull their Shang-Chi, which is huge. Pulling their Shang-Chi is probably the best thing that we could have gotten, because now they will have 2 resources that they can use, but they're not going to be able to do as much with it. And so, like, if they have a Knull of their own, they're not going to be able to clear our Destroyer. So they're going to have Knull and something else that's big. And so we know that they lost their death. I guess a Knull and a Taskmaster with the Electro, they could do that. That would be very, very specific cards that they had. I don't think they run Enchantress either. And we do force the retreat. So you guys, we're going to be seeing a lot more Galactus, a lot more Destroyer, a lot more Knull. Make sure to tech in your Debris, run your Cosmo counters where you can, even though that's a little bit less impactful for the Destroyer line of this deck. Good luck, you guys. We're going to go ahead and end the video there. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a like and a comment down below. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.